All right, let's get to another game going on this weekend. It's going to be a Monday night football game as Ohio State takes on Virginia Tech. We've had some line movement, quite a bit of movement actually. Ohio State opened 14 and now down to 11, although some of the early action has been or lately action this way, about 80% leaning toward the Buckeyes, and that is because it is a revenge game, ACC against the Big Ten, but it's not just any other Big Ten team with the defending champs in town. And they lost one game last year, and it was to this Virginia Tech team, and it was at Columbus. This Buckeye team is just positively loaded. 4 starters back on the offensive line. J.T. Barrett will come back as the starting quarterback. Only a sophomore, but he threw 34 touchdowns and 10 picks this last year. The defense improved dramatically. They do have a couple of suspensions coming in, which is part of the early line movement on this game. But still, the defense upgraded to 22 points per game last year, one of the better units in the country in the top 26. So, Hollis, do you look at situational handicapping in a game like this with revenge, or do you stick to matchups?
Well, I think a lot of it is revenge, losing 35-21 in the second game last year. But you know what? They weren't ready. Last year, Ezekiel Elliott, their running back, he wasn't ready. New quarterback, he wasn't ready. Curtis Samuel wasn't ready. They just didn't have, they just weren't ready. And Virginia Tech caught them by surprise. They have 7 starters back for Urban's triple option attack. I like J.T. Barrett if he starts, but you know what? If you go with Barrett or if you go with Corey, who played 3 of the best games I've ever seen at the end the season, there's a pro-style quarterback if I've ever seen one. But they're both going to hit 65% of their passes. But you know what? The same ratio of having the SEC with Alabama playing the Big Ten with Wisconsin, now we take the same ratio of the Big Ten playing an ACC team. Well, when somebody says that Virginia Tech is going to have probably the best defense in the ACC, what is that supposed to mean? That's not that impressive because the ACC conference isn't that impressive. When you sit there and say that Virginia Tech has 9 starters returning on offense, well, that's not impressive because they only scored 24 points a game. I wish 25% of them graduate and we get some new guys in there, but they didn't do that. Beamer, he's had 17 losses in the last 3 years. What's happened to his magic? He used to always have the magic playing there. When you compare the trend of the spread records, which is not really a trend, it speaks for itself. But when you look at Ohio State, their road record against the spread, 36-15-1. And then when you go over to Virginia Tech, when they're playing non-conference games, and that's what this is. Forget when they're playing, North Carolina State or somebody like Florida State or something like that. When you're playing in the ACC, that's a conference game. But when they go out of conference, 5-13-2 in non-conference games because it's a different league. So I'm going to go back to that fact that Urban Meyer has 7 starters back on defense, 7 back on offense. Their offense to defensive differential last year was 23 points per game in the final spread. We're laying 11 points here. I think the spread is coming down for a reason, and I think they can just reload on anybody that's missing for this game. It's a Monday night game, and Urban Meyer, he likes to look real good on national TV. It's the only game in town, ESPN, so he wants to look real good. So I'm going to lay the 10 and a half, 11 points.
Well, he certainly looked good last January on all those national TV games. Just to give you some insight on what happened in that game a year ago, 35-21, Virginia won at Columbus, and the yardage was almost identical. Virginia Tech didn't have a lot of yards, 324, but the difference in the game was offensive line play and efficiency, because J.T. Barrett, it was one of his first games there, and they got him for 7 sacks. They put pressure on him, and he was a young guy who just had trouble picking up the blitz and got out of sync, so they ended up going 4 of 16 on 3rd down. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech offense, which wasn't very good last year, was 9 of 17 on 3rd down, and that all ended up being the difference maker. Frank Beamer's offense, he's got a lot of talent back, 9 on offense, 8 on defense, but this offense was 96th in the nation in scoring last year. Not a very good offense. The strength of the team is the defense. He got 8 starters back. They allowed just 20 points per game last year. That was 14th in the country. Bud Foster has really a loaded unit. You got defensive tackle Luther Matty up front, quarterback Brandon facing. So this should be a terrific defense. However, Zach, they won at Columbus, which almost never happens. Can they do it 2 in a row here at home?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to win this game outright, but I do like the points with Virginia Tech. As you mentioned, last year's upset, if you remember, that point spread was very similar to this one. I think it was 9.5, 10 points. That's one game that I regret not taking the money line on last season. But Virginia Tech and Frank Beamer, I know they haven't had the glamour on offense these past few years. Logan Thomas a few years back was just awful to watch for 4 years as starter, 3 years as starter, whatever it was. But that defense, time and time again, is going to keep them in games. And I think it's to their advantage knowing that a year ago they beat this team on the road. They're at home. They're playing the defending national champions that have yet to name their starting quarterback, J.T. Barrett or Cardell Jones. But if they put Cardell Jones out there, he had 3 or 4 games as starter last year. If they put J.T. Barrett out there, he has the pressure of putting on a show. And also in the back of his mind is that game last year in which he lost for Ohio State. So there's a couple factors there for both of those quarterbacks. That's why I think Urban Meyer hasn't named that starter just yet. But when he does, I think that's going to play into the hands of Frank Beamer in that defense. He's a defensive coach. He's got those 9 starters back, and I think you can formulate a game plan. Typically, this wouldn't work against a team like Ohio State, but they've had a lot of preparation for this game defensively. And I think you have to take those points once again, just like you did last year, and take the points with Virginia Tech.
Well, I'm going to look at a defensive game, too, because I have serious concerns about Michael Brewer, the Hokie quarterback. 18 touchdowns, 15 picks last year. He got it done in Columbus when they met, but I still have some concerns about him overall. And you also have 3 offensive line starters gone for Virginia Tech. I don't have any concerns, though, with the Virginia Tech defense. They are very talented, should be one of the best in the country again, and they're certainly going to be sky high for this game. Virginia Tech, when they play on natural grass, 13-27 against the spread. However, I will take a look at both defenses being up for this game and playing particularly well, because Ohio State last year allowed just 22 points per game, and Virginia Tech, last 4 years, they were on a 31-19-2 run under the total. I'm looking at a battle of field goals and very tough defensive efforts. And if Ohio State does win this game, they really have a gravy schedule up until, the November 21st game against Michigan State. So they will be number 1 for a while if they get by this one. All right, before we get to the NFL, if you want to get free plays every day, you can go to jimwins.com. There's a free daily report you can get from Jim. Plus, there's ways to get free plays sent right to your cell phone via text at winner 313131.